Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on creating smarter content in WordPress. And if you're here, I'm sure you know that creating great content is key to a successful website. There's all kinds of great content on how to create great content out on the web. There's tips on everything from how to pick the right headlines and how to write great topics and keywords, even the optimal length of articles. But what's interesting about this is you always kind of wonder, how do we really know that that stuff is successful? The truth is that a lot of our content is based on theory. And a lot of it's some smart theory, and there's maybe some secondary data kind of backing some of it. But ultimately, to take things to the next level, we need to know, backed by data, what really is great content that gets people gets people engaged, and gets people converting. And so what, of course, a lot of people do, everyone knows they need data. And so what a lot of people do is they go and they install Google Analytics. And Google Analytics is great, but actually it doesn't really produce a lot of the most actionable data to help us build better data. And so a few years back, we set out to kind of correct this problem in Google Analytics and basically use the platform to actually help authors create better, more engaging content. And so I'm going to walk through a little bit of, so I have installed the intelligence plugin that's going to help us do all of this stuff inside of WordPress. And I'm going to walk through and kind of talk a little bit about some of the challenges inside of a traditional Google Analytics install. I'm going to go ahead and just open up. And so I'm on a demo page, and I'm opening up, this is Google's real-time reporting, so we can actually see data as it's coming through on our website. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up another anonymous browser to simulate a person going to our website. And so I'm sitting on an external page. This could be a search engine, simulating a search engine, social media, or something like that. These are just links into our website. So I'm going to go ahead and click the first one and go to our demo post A. And we'll see that we have a page hit come through in Google Analytics. Now, let's say, for example, that I came to this page and it really wasn't what I was expecting, so I clicked back. And so this is what Google Analytics calls a bounce. I'm going to go ahead and simulate a second person that is actually going to go and have a very different experience. So let's say they find another blog post. And instead, this time, this person says, no, this is exactly what I want. I want to read through this content. And so this is one of the challenges in Google Analytics, is that Google Analytics measures everything through page hits. What reported up here is page views. And this is great because we know which pages are being hit. We can find a lot of interesting information, like where people are coming from, referrers and so forth, even where people are geolocated. I'm in Dallas, so it's reporting that here. Things like what kind of device are they on? Is it mobile, or desktop, Mac or PC, browsers, all these kinds of great things. But ultimately, measuring just page views doesn't tell us a whole lot about what's really important on a website. Are we engaging our visitors and moving them towards converting and doing things that are important to the organization, achieving organizational objectives? And so what I just done is I had gone through, and our first person had clicked through to blog post alpha here, and our second, and then just clicked back, what's called a hard bounce. As opposed to a person, the second person clicked through to blog post C or Charlie, and they're actually now reading the content. It's what they want to find. And unfortunately, in Google Analytics will report, if I don't go to another page from this blog post C, if I don't go to another page, Google Analytics is going to treat both of these the same. It's going to show that there was a page hit and the person left, and it's not going to tell us what the time on site was, and it's going to call both of these a bounce, when in reality, we've got some sort of user experience gap that happened on the first post, but actually the second post, we gave the person what they wanted. It was good content, they read through it. So one of the first things we want to understand is, how deep are people engaging into our content, and when is it actually being read? And to do that, we can add some events to our website to help us track this information. So one of the first things we want to do is we want to measure the time that a page is actually open. And Google Analytics does have a time on page, but it's really kind of a skewed number because it only measures time between page hits. So if I just go to one page and I leave the website, it'll register no time on page. Whether the first one was 5 seconds and this one is a minute, it still gets 0 time on page. And so whatever the last page it hits on the website, you don't see any page time. The other thing that is nice to know is how deep do people scroll into content? And by combining these two things together, we can get a pretty good indicator of are people really reading our content. And so, for example, we might say, hey, if someone actually has had this page visible for at least 30 seconds and they scroll through 90% of the content, then we're going to go ahead and trigger an event, and we call it a page consumed event. We're going to trigger a page consumed event to show that this page was actually read. And so here it came through as I scrolled down the page. And so this allows us to differentiate between content that was a hard bounce, where there's some sort of disconnect with the user experience or what they're expecting, and someone that actually got what they really wanted, but might not have gone to another page on the website. I'm going to go ahead and actually simulate a third visitor going to our site. They're going to get a little bit more interactive. So this time I'm going to go to our blog post B. And so, it's not, and of course, measuring if people are actually reading is a great step up from just page hits, but ultimately we want to look for deeper engagement. Are we moving people towards a conversion? Are people championing our brand? And so we might want to look at things like, are people sharing our content? And so we want to automatically set up the ability that whenever someone starts sharing our content, we can push this data over into Google Analytics. And so, for example, we got a social share click, one on Twitter. It's also telling us what platform they're on, one on LinkedIn. Another thing that we would want to measure is, are people commenting on our blog posts? Now, this is a demo site. These are fake. These are basically spoofed pages, so you can't comment on a spoofed page. But if this is a real blog post, when we comment, we would actually see a comment event come through in Google Analytics. The other thing, of course, that's important to measure is video content. Out of the box, Google Analytics doesn't tell you anything about when people are playing videos. And so if you've got YouTube videos that are installed, then we want to go ahead and track when people play them. We also are going to do the same thing. We want to track how deep people play into video content. That's our video scroll event. If someone watched 90%, we'll get a video consumed, just like our page consumed, and say, yes, this is a video that people felt is worth watching all the way through. And of course, while it's great to be measuring all of this engagement that's going on, and what pages are generating content, ultimately, one of the most important things a website needs to do are conversions, or sometimes called our macro goals of our website. So, for example, going over and submitting something like a contact form. And so we want to make it really easy to track something like this. And so we do this again using events. So I pushed through a very special event that is a form submission event, and I tacked onto it. I tacked onto the fact that I want to trigger the contact goal. And so if we look over on conversions, we indeed triggered the contact goal. And so one of the challenges that we find is that a lot of people, less than 15% of people actually set up their conversion goals on their website. And of course, this is what's really important to show ROI for what you're doing. But one of the other problems that we see a lot of times when people set these things up, and so to make it really easy, what we want to do is have where people can set this kind of stuff up and then just easily go into WordPress and configure what goals they want to trigger on different things. So, on our main contact form, I can trigger a contact goal. Now, what people who do, of the 15% of people who do go set these up, the way you normally do is you go into Google Analytics, and a lot of people set up what they call a URL, a destination goal. So they'll redirect the form to a thank you page, and then when someone hits that thank you page, it'll trigger the goal in Google Analytics. But the problem with this is that actually that method triggers a lot of false positives. So for example, if I just left this page open and later came back to it, my browser might refresh and then it'll trigger the goal again, even though a form wasn't submitted, just because I'm on a particular page. Or I might bookmark it. I might, if it says an ebook download, I might send it to some friends. And all these different events could cause us to trigger a false goal. And so what we want to do is we want to set up our goal tracking so that it only triggers when a form is actually submitted. If someone just comes to this page, it's not going to trigger it again. And so you want to extend upon this. The first part, of being able to track the value of your content is to measure as many meaningful interactions on your website. And so some other ones that we might want to track out of the box might be when someone is clicking on a social media profile. Swing back over to events. We'll see that come through. That should be our guy right there. Yep, social profile click for Twitter. Or if someone, say, downloads a file, we want to track that. Again, something that doesn't normally get tracked in Google Analytics. If someone goes to an external website, that might be an important engagement. Or someone clicks on a phone number link or an email link. We want to make sure that we're tracking all of these different types of engagement. And then we can attribute those back to the content that people entered by, content that was on the path to get to these things. So we now start to understand what content is working best to create engagement and conversions. So when we start doing all of these different types of things, we start to get to tracking a lot of different pieces of data. And Google Analytics already has a ton of reports. And so now we're tracking even more data. And so one of the tricks that we like to use is to try to bring everything back to a single KPI, what we call a score. And we do that by assigning a value to any important events that are going on our website. So for example, we have 2 goals set up in our website. And so we're going to do 100 points when someone submits a contact form. And as we build out more things, say we've got ebook downloads and newsletter sign up, we can associate whatever points we want with those kinds of things also. And then we might have things that are more engagement events. So if someone comments on a blog post, we might only give it 10 points. If someone shares in social, again, we might give it 10 points. If someone just reads a page, we might give that our page consumed event. We might give that 1/10 of a point. And we start to add up all of these points to understand what kind of value our website's producing. And more importantly, we can start attributing that value back to different things like marketing channels, content, visitors, and so forth to understand what's producing the most value. And so you could go into Google Analytics and pull all of these reports. But we found that there's a couple limitations with using Google Analytics. One is a lot of people don't go and look at it. And if they do, because it's another place they have to go, and if they do, a lot of times the data is not getting back to the people who are your authors and your editors and the people who are creating content. And those are the people that are really important to get this information to. So we wanted to make sure to integrate as much data as possible where our content producers live in the website itself. And so we've got so we generate some reports, and in particular, these reports are a little bit different. A lot of the Google Analytics reports are built more around vanity metrics, sort of just page hits and just kind of basic things, not really around value and engagement. And so what we want to do is build a set of reports that are doing a better job of showing you the true value that's going on your website, instead of just sort of these vanity metrics. And so while we can score an entire website, we could go in and score things like different traffic sources. One of the most interesting things to score is going to be our content. And so from here, we can start to understand what content produces the most value by when a page acts as a landing page, totaling up all those different engagement events that are happening both on that page and downstream. And so we can see from that, we came in that our beta blog post was the one that we did all those different events on, and then eventually we went and converted on. And then we saw that our alpha post was just a simple bounce. And so it got a very small score because our person just bounced. And Charlie, which would look like just a bounce inside of Google Analytics, actually is scored higher because they actually read the piece of content. And obviously you'd score even higher if they did things like share the content or comment, or even go and click on a CTA or something along those lines. And so years ago, we put this on our website. We have all of our developers creating content, so forth. And one of the things they thought most interesting is that whenever they were on a piece of content, they then had a tab that would give them a scorecard that would show them all the things related to their content, all the different business impact of what their content was actually driving. And so if I go and I look on, if I go and look on this this blog post B, we can see that we had a contact form that got submitted. So whenever people are writing, they can see things like, did people download ebooks, or do people sign up for our newsletter, or do those kinds of things on our website? And they'll also be able to see, it'll take a few minutes for Google Analytics to process. It only takes about a half an hour for Google Analytics to process some of this data, and we're doing it live. But also what will show up are any of the social shares, any comments, any types of engagement. People now can see in a snapshot just by clicking on a tab from their blog post. Now, one of the interesting things that happened is, as our developers who really just kind of wrote content around things they thought were interesting, and as they started to see the impact of their content, it started to kind of gamify itself. And so they tried to figure out ways of creating higher scores, getting more engagement, and so forth. And ultimately, people started asking, well, what is it about a particular blog post that makes it more valuable? And we thought about, well, are there some ways that we could A/B test, just like you can A/B test landing pages? And the reality is that blog posts are kind of hard to A/B test. There's a lot of different end goals. Where something like a landing page, let's say you've got a traditional landing page where there's a form for someone to fill out, and the one thing you want them to do is fill out that form. And so it makes it easy to set up, say, 5 different types of landing pages and set up a traditional A/B test and see which one's the best. But blog posts, there's a lot of different outcomes that we might want. So what we kind of came up with is, what made more sense is to track attributes about that content to understand what content attributes are the most interesting. And so we can do that going back into our reports. We can do that by going underneath content, and we can do things like track what authors create the most engaging content, what categories, what content types are the most interesting. And so, for example, if I go into our data, it'll take a few minutes for our data to start coming through. I need to change to the pro version. So everything I've shown up to at this point in time is available in the free version of Intelligence. There is a paid version that gives some extended capabilities. I'm going to flip this over to the paid version. Actually, what I'm going to do instead is since there's not a whole lot of data on this site, I'm going to show this is the demo site. I'm going to go ahead and show some screenshots of data from an actual website. Presentation. And so what we see here is that we can look at various different types of content attributes. So, for example, I'm going to turn off the auto rotate on this real quick. It's always a fun part about doing a live demo. Let's see here, design. play. How do I turn off? There we go. Transitions. That's how we do it. Okay. Now we can look at some actual data. So what we're doing here is we're pushing attributes about our content over into Google Analytics. Things like, what is the content type? Who is the author? How long is a piece of content? What is the subject, using taxonomy terms and so forth, as our content about? And then what we can do is we can pull these different attributes back and look at the total value that all these different pieces of content are generating. What's nice about this, being able to blend this data from Google Analytics back into the website, is we can do something like, say, for example, the length of content. We know that we might have 7 blog posts on our website that are between 500 and 600 words. And so we can divide the total value by that to understand on a page-by-page basis what attributes are producing the most value. And so whenever, it's interesting, whenever people talk about, all right, this is the length of article that you should have, and this is the best practice, they're normally talking about what is going to rank best in the search engines. What we really want to do is not just rank well in the search engines, but we want to understand how well is that content engaging once people click that listing in the search engine results. And do we have a disconnect? And we want to know, are we converting? And so we want to make sure that we have the whole picture, not just about ranking better in the search engines and attracting more people. And so our page attributes help us do that. So what I was going to do next is there's a lot of things that happen in intelligence automatically. And there's certain things that have to be that you'd want to customize per your website. But what I was going to do next is run through an installation. It's there's a few steps involved in getting it installed. And what we find is, after people see it one time on how to do an installation, it's pretty easy after that. But because we're doing all these connections back into Google Analytics and pulling data and working with different data sources and so forth, there's a few things we need to do to make sure everything is connected up. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my website, and I'm going to actually reinitialize it. Here's my training website. And for those of you who are curious, we're hosting this on Pantheon. And so you've got this back end that you can do all kinds of interesting things. And one of the dangerous things you don't want to do on a real website is go ahead and wipe it. But we want to go ahead and wipe this so we can show what an installation would look like on a fresh install. And so now if I go back to my website, now I'm back to the installing WordPress. So I'm going to go ahead and just set this up real quick. Super user, copy this password, put in an email. And log into my WordPress website. And the one thing I'm going to do before anything is I'm going to go ahead and enable a form. And I'm also going to enable just sort of a dependent module that our host needs. Oops. And it helps if I actually select action. Let's go ahead and activate. And so to install intelligence, the first thing you would do on a normal website is you could go to add new if you use the built-in plugin system inside of WordPress, and just type intelligence and it'll show up in our list. The files are actually already in my website because I reset it. So I don't need to re-download them, but I'm just going to go ahead and activate. And so when I activate, I now get this launch setup wizard that's going to now walk me through the rest of the process. So I go ahead and I click on that, and it's going to just walk me through some different steps. So the first thing that we need to do is we want to install there's a plugin that we need to install called the Google Analytics Dashboard for WordPress that enables us to pull data from Google Analytics. And if you don't have Google Analytics already installed on your website, I'd recommend using it to embed tracking. And so again, this is already available on our website. Otherwise, I just go to the add new, but I'm just going to go ahead and enable it. And then when I go back to my wizard, it'll detect that it's installed. And so it just moves me automatically to the next step. So now it's telling me I need to go configure that. So I'm going to run through. And so what this is doing is this is authorizing our website to pull data from the Google Analytics API. So we can bring data back into our website. And I want to select a primary, I'm going to go ahead and select a primary property inside of Google Analytics to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and just use this one. Now, the way intelligence works is it actually sets up, and Google Analytics has an interesting feature that you can actually track data in multiple data sets. And intelligence does a lot of things to enhance the data for your website. And you might already have done a lot of things, either using Google Tag Manager or, doing something else with Google Analytics. You might already have an existing Google Analytics account that's got a lot of things done to it. And so how intelligence works is we set up a second Google Analytics property to track the data. So it doesn't mess if you have an existing one, that one just keeps working the way it normally would. We're going to set up a second data set for the enhanced data out of intelligence. And so right here, it's basically telling me that I want to go set that up. So I run over to Google Analytics, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new property. And I'm going to call this intelligence training. Done this a few times, so this is now the 6th property in here. Fill out a little bit of information. Train at intelligencewp.com is actually what I want to do. Pick a category, computers, electronics, set a time zone, and I'm going to get my tracking ID. Now, one of the things that I recommend, and all the experts recommend that you should do whenever you set up a new Google Analytics property is you want to create a separate view. So Google Analytics, basically views allow you to sort of filter and do various different manipulations on your data. And one of the things that you want to do is keep your raw data. So that's what this all website data is about. I like to keep my raw data there. One thing I am going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go and just turn on tracking for WordPress's search. So basically what this does is whenever someone uses the search box in your WordPress site, it's now going to track the keywords that are being used for search. And so I am going to turn that on in my raw property, but now I'm going to copy this view and create a second one with some extra filters. I'm going to call this main Intel 5, and this is going to be my main view that we're going to be putting all of our goals and setting up all of our custom metrics and all those different types of things. One last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a couple filters. You do not need these. Actually, these are really just for the pro version of VTK. There we go. These are really just for the pro version and really for just some advanced things. I just am in the habit of doing them. So now I've got a property set up, and if I refresh my page, it's going to show up in my list. And so here's my, I should have called it. Let me go back and call it the right thing. This is actually, yep. So this is actually the 6th property. So just so we don't get confused, leave that. And now when I refresh, it'll be updated here. So I want to pick my main view. So now we've picked we've now picked our second property for doing this. And the next thing we need to do is we need to get a API key from intelligence. And this is really kind of a similar process to setting up a property in Google Analytics. The first thing I would do is I would want to go to this website. I'm going to go ahead and log out real quick. And so if you haven't created a property inside of the intelligence API, you'd want to create an account using this over here. I already have one set up for my demo. So I'm going to demo@gmail.com and then password. And I will be able to log into my account. Yeah. Helps if I spell it right. There we go. And there's a demo account, so I've got a whole lot of different properties that are set up. What I'm going to do is it'll make it easy for me to create a new one. I'm just going to click on this and go ahead and add my property. And I get a new API key. And I just need to bring that API key back. Well, let's see here. Maybe I didn't copy that right. Need to bring, actually what it's telling me is I need to run through the setup of the Google Analytics property. And so what this is going to do is this is going to go auto configure a lot of extended features inside of Google Analytics, custom dimensions, custom metrics, things like that. So I need to read my own wizard that was telling me I needed to run that before it's going to allow me to proceed. So not an issue with the API key. Now that that's done, next step. And so what I could do here is if I wanted to, I could just exit out. I could just use the defaults and finish the wizard, which is maybe a good thing to do if you're doing this for the first time. You know, if you just want to kind of play around with it and get used to it. But if you're a little bit more of a power marketer or power, you want to understand some more data and be walked through a couple more things, I can go ahead and I'm going to use the extended wizard, which is going to add a few extra steps. So the first thing that this does is it says, hey, we've detected you've got a form builder on your website. In this case, Contact Form 7, you should go enable the add-on that allows tracking of Contact Form 7. And so I'll just run back over to the plugin admin, and I can click Activate here. And so this add-on now allows me to extend regular Contact Form 7 so I can track form submissions. And there's some add-ons for other ones like Gravity Forms and so forth. And so now if I run back over here, I click the next step, it says, hey, I've got that done. These are sort of some of the default things I want to track on the website. I'm going to add one more because we're going to use it for our demo. I'm going to do this admin. It's going to help us design custom things that we want to track. I'll go ahead and do that. This next thing I can set up as many goals as I want. So it can be a little tricky to set up goals in Google Analytics. So with intelligence, you can set up your goals directly in WordPress, and it'll go and build them for you over in Google Analytics. For now, I'm just going to go ahead and leave these two default ones. And so we'll see happen there. If I go back to my view, we'll see that now my two goals got automatically built and formatted, so they'll trigger when those specially formatted events come through. The next page I've got this is my scoring, which we looked at a little bit earlier. If you're a power user, you might want to go ahead and tweak some of this stuff up right now. What I'd recommend if this is your first time using it, or you don't have any strong reasons for changing it, just leave the defaults as they are and go ahead and click next step. And then the last thing it's saying, hey, tracking forms is pretty important. You've got a form already on your website. Let's go ahead and set that up to track. So it says I've got the default Contact Form 7, and I can go to my tab, And I can say, hey, whenever someone submits this, trigger the contact goal. If I wanted to, I could override the default points for this goal is 100. And if I wanted to, I could override that number. This becomes really useful for things like if, let's say, you have an ebook download and there's certain ebooks that you think are more valuable for people to download than others. You might have a default value of, say, 50, and then you can tweak the value on an ebook by ebook basis using this right here. But I'm just going to go ahead and leave the default. It's going to go back to the default 100 that we set in our main scoring, save, and we are all done. And so the next thing it recommends, so now our website is tracking all of those different events. We can actually go through the same demo that we went through when I started this webinar. I can just go to help and demo. By default, it's disabled. They're just spoofed pages. It doesn't actually add any data to your website. And you normally don't want those pages just sitting out there. So if you want to play with it, you click the enable demo, and now you can go to those pages and play around with the content. One of the things though that people a lot of times will want to do is do some custom tracking on their website. And so let's say, for example, we're on the demo, and if I go back to my demo blog post B, one of the things I've kind of set up in the demo is that I have these call to actions that are down at the bottom. And if I want to, I can actually see what are all the different things that are being tracked on this page. So I'm going to go ahead and click on I clicked on when I enabled that checkbox for the admin. I'll show you briefly where that is. If I go to, you can turn that on and off. So if I go to settings, this right here, this checkbox here, admin, enabled an extra feature so that now only when I'm logged in as an admin, regular people can't do this. People, you've got to have the right permissions. But I can now say I want to explore what is being tracked on this website, and when I click on these things, it'll now tell me the data it's pushing over into Google Analytics. So whether it's the social sharing, whether it's the video, it's going to tell me the types of things that are being pushed over. Yeah, now it'll go ahead and stop. And tells me about the to stop and the scroll and all that kind of good stuff. So one of the things I might want to try, and there's my page consumed event coming through. So one of the things I might want to do is track this call to action, or even track this landing page whenever someone hits this landing page, because I can track forms. And so I can just take how many times people hit this page, divide it by the number of times this form was submitted, and now I know a conversion rate. So if I wanted to track, this form, what I can do is go into the custom settings into intelligence. And so one of the things there's a lot of things that track automatically, but we also wanted to make it very easy for people to do custom tracking on their own. And so here are all the things that are all automatically happening through programming, but I can go ahead and add some custom events. So for now, I'm going to add something called a landing page view. I'm going to give it a name, and this enables us to export this event so it can be used in other websites. And I don't really need any of this other stuff. All I need to do is say, hey, when you hit a certain URL, I just want you to fire when you hit this very specific URL. And so I'm going to add this event. And now when I go back to my blog, one of the things, I'm going to need to do this over on my anonymous page, because right now I have tracking turned off for the admin. So I'll show you where that setting is. So like right now I'm logged in as the administrator and I'm excluding tracking for the administrator. So I need to be an anonymous person to actually trigger that event to go. And so then if I go to my blog post B and I click on my CTA, I go back to my real-time analytics. Here in a second, and Google Analytics takes a bit to get a new property spun up. I guess it's sort of here we go. And so here's our landing page view. And so now we're able to track, we can just look at the number of landing page views that happened on this page, and then we look at the conversions to understand what our conversion ratio is. Now, a lot of times when we're tracking things on a website, we actually want to be tracking interactions, clicking or hovering or submitting or doing other things. And so, for example, we might want to just track whenever someone actually clicks on this call to action. And we can do that too. It's a little bit more sophisticated how that gets set up. But for example, I can go over and I'm going to create a new event. I'm going to call this a CTA click. Again, make it exportable, give it a name. And what I'm going to need to do this time, I do want to say what kind of page it's on. So I'm going to go ahead and have this happen on any page on the intelligence demo. So that's just sort of a wild card that says, hey, any page on the demo, we want to track CTAs. And here I need to give it a little bit more information on what I want to track. And so my call to action actually has a class on it called track CTA that we can see right here. And so I'm going to go ahead and track based on that. So that way, anytime somebody creates a link that has a class track CTA on it, it'll now automatically be tracked. I'm going to add my event and I do a refresh. In fact, if I'm on my admin side and I go back to my blog post, I turn on my Event Explorer. We now see that I've got a green box around my call to action. And when I click on it, this information gets sent over into Google Analytics. Or if I'm over on my demo person site, I can just click it and the data will actually go through instead of just doing some of the administrative stuff over on this side. And so in this way, we can start looking at things on our page that we're going, hey, that's something I want someone to click on or I want someone to do, and we can start setting up custom events to make those things happen. And so one of the other things that we want to be tracking, and this is a feature, so everything that I've been showing so far is all in the free version of Intelligence. But if you do opt to go with either the basic or the pro version of Intelligence, you also are able to push over page attributes into Google Analytics. And so by default, these are set up so that your categories taxonomy is set up to track your tags, your format, but you could track anything you want. So for example, if you wanted to test what kind of tone do we think is interesting? So should it be corporate? Could it be snarky? Could it be casual? You could set that up as a taxonomy. Or if you are writing, you might want to take your personas and say, here are different types of people we're writing for. And so it might be, hey, this blog post is written for a nonprofit or a B2B company, and it's written for a C-level executive or someone who actually does marketing or does something else. And you can actually take your roles, your demographics, psychographics, and things like that, and attach them to your content. And all that information will get pushed over into Google Analytics, helping you understand what types of audience attributes are finding our website the most engaging, and things along those lines. So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and open it up for any questions, or if there's any questions or any particularly anything. If people have been trying to do any installs and they need some help with that, just go ahead and type a question into the chat box if you've got one. All right. Normally find that once someone asks the first question, then we get a few. But it takes someone to ask the first question. So is anything like I said, anything around different things you can track, different things you might different types of attributes that you might want to use for websites, for your content, anything along those lines. Well. So far we don't have any content. We don't have any questions in our chat. So I'll go over a couple of other things that are kind of interesting in what the platform does. So one of the other things that the pro version of Intelligence does is it actually tracks individual people and their journey through the website. And so, for example, whenever someone comes to the website, it's going to track them anonymously through a particular hash. And then if someone submits a form, we now know who they are and we can associate a name with them. But even if we're tracking them anonymously, we can do things like go back and look at, this person, for example, they came in, they came in on the page, the website and redesign success ebook. It triggered a landing page view. Then they submitted a form. We got our landing page conversion. And then they went on to a couple of other pages on the website. And so we start to kind of understand, the path that each individual person is taking on the site. Also, we can also then compare who is producing the most value on our website. And what's interesting is a lot of times you've got people on your site that are potential customers, but you also have people who are brand champions. And so, understanding who are your champions and being able to reach out to them or just identify the types of things that they are doing can really help. And then one of the last, turn off some of the auto rotation on this stuff. And then one of the last things that we also do in the pro version is that whenever someone submits a piece of information that identifies them, such as an email or something like that, we can then go and bounce that across a few different APIs on the web that'll gather any publicly available data about who this person is. And we can start to seam together data from Google Analytics, such as where they located, what kind of browser and OS are they using, and information from the content management system, like what forms have been submitted, what data have been, we can summarize all the data that's been submitted in those forms, and then information that's publicly available through other websites, like what are some of their social media profiles, or a summary that they might write about themselves to describe themselves. So that we can start to understand better who our audience is. And again, you can't do this stuff until someone does something that's identifiable, like submitting a contact form, some sort of lead form, or logging into the WordPress website. Then we actually know who they are, and we start to build a profile of who they are. And so, any other questions? Okay. Well, so hopefully this kind of shown you guys. I'm a big believer in we don't just kind of measure great content by theory, by going up and reading up of all these things, or even how much traffic a piece of content is getting, or how well something ranks in the search engines. Ultimately, what we want is we want conversions, what makes our stakeholders happy, and we want engagement, what makes our users happy, and we got to make our users happy to get them to convert, make our stakeholders happy. And so those are the real things that I want to measure. And so this is a big passion of ours, is to help people build more results-oriented, data-driven, smarter content. And let me know. Please install Intelligence. And let me know if some of the interesting things you've learned, or if you've got any feedback on how to make the system better. Thanks for joining.